Hello there, and welcome to another edition of Last Week Tonight, where we delve into the murky waters of global politics and economics, one overly complicated issue at a time. Tonight we have a particularly intriguing topic that has been making headlines and stirring debates across the globe. It's a tale of two economies, two leaders, and a whole lot of drama. So sit tight and get ready for a deep dive into the world of tariffs, trade wars, and diplomatic tensions. Tonight, we're talking tariffs, trade wars, and a diplomatic dust-up between two of North America's biggest players, Canada and the United States. These two countries, while often seen as friendly neighbors, have found themselves at odds over economic policies that could have far-reaching implications. Tariffs, in particular, have become a hot-button issue, with both sides imposing and retaliating in a tit-for-tat manner that has left many wondering what the future holds for cross-border trade. Now you might think that with Canada being America's friendly neighbor to the north, all would be rosy between these two economic powerhouses. After all, they share one of the longest undefended borders in the world and have a history of cooperation and mutual support. However, the reality is far more complex. Economic interests, political ideologies, and national pride often clash, leading to tensions that can escalate quickly. Think again. The relationship is more like that pair of siblings who share a bedroom, mostly civil, occasionally prone to epic brawls over borrowed clothes and stolen snacks. In this case, the borrowed clothes are trade agreements and the stolen snacks are market shares. The stakes are high and the disagreements can be fierce. It's a dynamic that keeps political analysts and economists on their toes, trying to predict the next move in this ongoing saga. In this corner, we have Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, all charm and charisma, the political equivalent of a perfectly poured cup of maple syrup. Trudeau has been a vocal advocate for free trade and has worked tirelessly to position Canada as a leader in the global economy. His approach is often seen as diplomatic and measured, aiming to build bridges rather than walls. However, his stance on tariffs and trade has sometimes put him at odds with his southern neighbor. And in the other corner we have President Donald Trump, a man who needs no introduction, especially when it comes to his love affair with tariffs. Trump's approach to trade has been anything but conventional. He has often used tariffs as a tool to assert economic dominance and protect American industries. His America First policy has led to a series of trade disputes, not just with Canada, but with several other countries as well. His unpredictable style and hardline tactics have made him a polarizing figure on the global stage. Buckle up, folks, because this is one international incident that could have serious consequences for both countries and maybe even the whole world. The ripple effects of a trade war between Canada and the United States could impact global markets, disrupt supply chains, and create economic uncertainty. It's a high-stakes game where the rules are constantly changing, and the outcome is anything but certain. So stay tuned as we unpack the complexities of this economic showdown and explore what it means for the future of international trade. So what exactly went down between these two North American titans? Well, it all started when President Trump in his infinite wisdom decided to slap tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum imports. His reasoning? National security, of course. Because nothing screams existential threat like a few tons of Canadian aluminum, eh? Naturally, Prime Minister Trudeau wasn't exactly thrilled with this decision. He called the tariffs unacceptable and insulting, which, let's be honest, is probably Canadian for, "We're about to unleash the fury of 1,000 moose on your economy." Trudeau argued that Canada has always been a reliable trading partner and ally to the US, and that these tariffs would only serve to hurt businesses and consumers on both sides of the border. He even went so far as to say that these tariffs were a direct attack on the Canadian economy. Ouch, that's gotta sting, even for a president with skin as thick as Trump's, don't you think? Now you might be thinking, so what? Why should I care about tariffs on steel and aluminum? It's just some metal, right? Wrong. This issue goes far beyond just a few materials. These metals are the backbone of many industries. Think about it. Steel and aluminum are used in everything from construction to manufacturing, from cars to airplanes, and even in the cans that hold your favorite beverages. This isn't just about steel and aluminum, folks. It's about the ripple effects that these tariffs can have on the entire economy. When the cost of these essential materials goes up, it impacts a wide range of products and industries. This is about the much larger issue of protectionism, a fancy word for trying to protect your own country's businesses by screwing over everyone else's. Protectionism might sound good in theory, but in practice, it often leads to trade wars and economic instability. See, when you slap tariffs on imports, it makes those goods more expensive for consumers. This isn't just about a few extra dollars here and there, it can significantly impact the cost of living. That means American businesses and consumers end up paying more for Canadian steel and aluminum, which can drive up prices on everything from cars to beer cans. Imagine the cost of your next car going up by hundreds or even thousands of dollars. And let's be honest, nobody wants to pay more for beer, right? But it's not just about beer, it's about the cumulative effect on everyday items that we often take for granted. But it's not just the US that feels the pain. These tariffs also hurt Canadian businesses that rely on exporting their goods to the US. When these businesses face higher costs, they often have to pass those costs on to consumers or cut back on production. These tariffs also hurt Canadian businesses that rely on exporting their goods to the US. And when those businesses suffer, so do Canadian jobs, wages, and the overall economy. It's a chain reaction that can have devastating effects. And when those businesses suffer, so do Canadian jobs, wages, and the overall economy. This can lead to higher unemployment rates and lower standards of living for many people. It's a lose-lose situation, really. Both countries end up worse off, and the global economy takes a hit. Trade tensions can escalate, leading to further economic downturns and strained international relations. The bottom line is this: tariffs are a blunt instrument, and using them in this way is like trying to perform brain surgery with a chainsaw. It's an imprecise tool that can cause more damage than it fixes. It's messy, it's dangerous, and it's likely to cause more harm than good. Instead of fostering economic growth and cooperation, tariffs can lead to economic isolation and stagnation. So next time you hear about tariffs, remember, it's not just about metal, it's about the bigger picture. Now, this latest trade spat might seem like a sudden eruption of animosity between these two normally chummy neighbors, but if you dig a little deeper, you'll find that the roots of this conflict go way back. The US and Canada, despite their friendly facade, have always had a bit of a sibling rivalry when it comes to trade. It's like they're constantly trying to one-up each other, and sometimes things get a little heated. But the truth is, the US and Canada have a long and complicated history when it comes to trade. This isn't just a modern-day issue. It's been brewing for centuries. From the early days of fur trading to the bustling border crossings of today, trade has always been a cornerstone of the relationship between these two nations. And with that comes a fair share of disagreements. Remember that whole War of 1812 thing? Yeah, that wasn't just about territorial disputes or national pride. Trade played a significant role in the tensions that led to that conflict. The British, who controlled Canada at the time, were imposing restrictions on American trade, and the US wasn't too happy about it. It was a classic case of economic interests clashing with political ambitions. Yeah, that was partly about trade disputes. The British wanted to control the flow of goods and resources, and the Americans were determined to assert their independence. It was a tug-of-war that had significant economic implications for both sides. And even after the war ended, the trade tensions didn't just disappear. They evolved and took on new forms. Turns out, even back then, these two couldn't quite agree on who should be selling what to whom. The 19th century saw numerous trade negotiations and agreements, each one trying to balance the interests of both nations. From timber to fish, and everything in between, there was always something to haggle over. And these negotiations weren't always smooth sailing. There were plenty of bumps along the way. Fast forward to the 20th century, and you've got disputes over softwood lumber, dairy products, and even car parts. These industries are vital to both economies, and any disruption in trade can have significant ripple effects. The softwood lumber dispute, for instance, has been a recurring issue for decades, with both sides accusing the other of unfair practices. And let's not even get started on dairy. The US and Canada have very different approaches to dairy farming, leading to frequent clashes over market access and pricing. It seems like every few years there's a new trade-related bone of contention between these two. Whether it's tariffs on steel and aluminum or disagreements over digital trade, there's always something to keep the negotiators busy. And while these disputes can be frustrating, they also highlight the deep economic ties between the US and Canada. After all, you don't argue this much with someone you don't care about. And let's not forget about NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. This landmark deal, signed in 1994, was supposed to usher in a new era of free trade and cooperation between the US, Canada, and Mexico. It aimed to eliminate trade barriers and create a more integrated North American economy. And for the most part, it succeeded. Trade between the three countries increased significantly, and many industries benefited from the reduced tariffs and increased market access. This landmark deal, signed in 1994, was supposed to usher in a new era of free trade and cooperation between the US, Canada, and Mexico. But even NAFTA hasn't been without its share of controversy and renegotiations. Critics argue that it led to job losses and wage stagnation in certain sectors, while supporters point to the overall economic growth and increased trade. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between, and as the world changes, so too must our trade agreements. But even NAFTA hasn't been without its share of controversy and renegotiations. The agreement has been revisited and revised multiple times, most recently with the introduction of the USMCA, or the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. This new deal aimed to address some of the shortcomings of NAFTA and modernize the trade relationship for the 21st century. But as with any major agreement, not everyone is happy with the changes. There are still protests and debates over the impact of these trade deals on workers, industries, and the environment. So yeah, this latest tariff tiff, it's just another chapter in the long and storied history of US-Canada trade relations. These two countries are like an old married couple, bickering over the same issues year after year. But despite the disagreements, they always find a way to make it work, because at the end of the day, their economic partnership is too important to let a few trade disputes get in the way. Just another chapter in the ongoing saga of US-Canada trade relations, and something tells me it won't be the last. As the global economy continues to evolve, new challenges and opportunities will arise, and the US and Canada will have to navigate these changes together, just as they have for centuries. So, while the headlines might make it seem like the sky is falling, remember that this is just part of the natural ebb and flow of international trade. And if history is any guide, these two neighbors will find a way to keep their economic relationship strong. And something tells me it won't be the last. The future will undoubtedly bring new trade disputes and negotiations, but it will also bring new opportunities for collaboration and growth. The key is to keep the lines of communication open and to approach each challenge with a spirit of cooperation and mutual respect. Because at the end of the day, the US and Canada are stronger together than they are apart. And that's something worth remembering.